All right, I'm going to cover, Thursday's handout. It's workbook pages 10 and 11, I believe. So, dealing with similar figures. If you remember, we talked about similar figures a little bit in the first week. I believe that was last Thursday. So, similar figures are the same shape, but they're not the same size, okay? Two things have to be true about them. Their corresponding angles have to be congruent, and we'll talk more about what that means later. And their sides have to be proportional. And again, we'll talk more about that when we get to page 11, which will be the back of the handout. All right, so each pair of figures you see here are similar. We already know that. We're told they're similar. Find the missing side. So this has to be done using proportional relationships. So while you may be able to do this in your head or on your calculator without showing any work, you are required to show work on this and show it as a proportion. That's what the Georgia Standard is trying to assess. Can you set it up and solve it as a proportion? So the first thing is to set up a proportion which looks like a fraction equal to a fraction. So fraction bar, equal sign, fraction bar. That's the first thing you want to do. The next thing is decide what shape you're going to pull your first number from. For me, I usually gravitate to whatever shape's on the left and then whatever number or letter is on the top left. And for me, that would be X in this particular problem. I kind of gravitate towards that X. So I'm going to place it in the top left of my proportion. So here's the key to setting up your proportion. This is one of the most important things about this whole lesson. Is if you start, let's say I started from the left figure and I placed an X up here, that whole top level of the proportion, those numbers have to come from the same figure. So if I start with X on the top, I have to put 17 on the top. That is a requirement, that everything on the top level comes from the same figure. Everything that's placed on the bottom comes from the separate or other figure. So now that I have X and 17 across the top from figure 1, I've got to match them up with their corresponding piece. X matches or corresponds to 288. So that goes underneath. It basically makes a matching pair. That now is a ratio. And 17 corresponds to 306. So we now have our first proportion. Now we need to cross multiply. So I'm going to do X times 306. That's going to be 306X. And it is equal to the cross product of 288 times 17. 4,896. 4,896. Okay? Just simple multiplication. X times 360, 306X. 288 times 17, 4,896. All right, so I have a one-step equation. To solve that, I need to divide both sides by 306. And so we represent that in an equation by making fractions out of it. From here on out through high school, if you're dividing in an equation, you're going to use fraction bar generally. Okay? 306 divided by 306 makes 1x. It technically is a 1x, and it would be, it would look like that, and that's acceptable. But every variable has an understood 1 in front of it. We just don't write that generally, okay? So just plain old x is what we're looking for. Then you divide 4,896 by 306 to get your final answer. All right, and when I do so, I get x equals 16. And that's how you solve for a missing side using a proportion. All right, problem number 2. Fraction bar, equal sign, fraction bar. I'm going to start right here. I'm going to start with the number 84. If I start with 84 from this figure, I have to use 21 up here. Same level has to come from the same figure. So the top comes from figure 1. The bottom will come from figure 2. All right, 84 matches up with 12. 21 matches up with x. So that's my proportion. Cross multiply. 84 times x is 84x. Equal sign. 12 times 21. 252. Okay. One-step equation. That's 84 times x. So we want to undo that with division. So we divide both sides by 84. That makes 1x And 252 divided by 84 equals 3. So the missing side is 3. All right. Problem number 3. I'm going to use 5 and 5 across the top. That matches up with x and 85. Cross multiply. 5 times 85, 425 equals 5x. Divide both sides by 5 to solve. And we find that 85 is equal to x. Number 4. Set up my proportion. I'm going to start right here. X and 44. Shape number 1, across the top. Shape number 2, it's going to go across the bottom. I just got to make sure that I match up corresponding pieces. X and 16 are a match. 44 and 11. So x times 11 is 11x. 16 times 44 is 704. 704. Divide both sides by 11 to solve for x. And we find out that the answer is 64. So the missing piece is 64. All right. I'm going to erase and scroll up. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit faster. So setting up my proportion, I'm gonna get 48 and 320 across the top. That's from the same shape. That pairs up with 3 and x. 48 times x is 48x. That was right here. I'm gonna cross multiply in the other direction. So 3 times 320 is 960. One step equation, divide both sides by 48. X is equal to 20. All right, problem number 6. We'll use x and 16. That pairs up with 112 and 112. So 112x is equal to 1792. Divide both sides by 112. X equals 16. Okay. Problem 7. 36 and 60. X and 10. Cross multiply. That gives me 360 equal to 60x. Divide both sides by 60. 6 equals x. We'll use 216 and 234. And that corresponds with 12 and x. 216x is equal to 2,808. Divide both sides by 216. X equals 13. All right. That is page 10.